Welcome to Stand Up to Racism Conference, Resisting the Rise of Racism and Fascism. My name's Samira Ali. I'm part of Stand Up to Racism in South East London. I've been working with Stand Up to Racism around fighting back the far right in Honour Oak, as well as organising the demo outside the Home Office a couple of weeks ago. I think obviously this conference comes at a really crucial yet exciting time. Obviously this week we have seen Bradman getting the sack, which I think is so great. But this obviously follows her disgusting comments that have fueled and emboldened people like Tommy Robinson to come back onto our streets. And this all comes after, I think, a year of intensified racism from both Braverman and Sunak, which is really opening the door to the far right as they attempt to grow around Britain. And we've also got to rejoice around the Rwanda plan being blocked by the highest court, after mass campaigning. And I think Stand Up to Racism is really proud of all the work it's done with unions and others to including Care for Calais for this to happen. But of course Sunak also showing flagrant disregard for this and attempting to push back on the laws and so on. And we've also, seeing in the wake of Black Lives Matter, the fight for justice and to oppose institutional racism, of course, has to continue. And I think this conference is incredibly important, and we've got over 900 people registered today. It's a hybrid event, so a lot of these people will be online, but we've got people joining from around Britain as well as internationally. So the way that the conference is going to run, we've got a few sessions. So we're going to start with a welcoming plenary, and then we've got a session on refugees welcome, which will be followed by a lunch break. And just to let people know, we've got like bagels and stuff for lunch here, so there'll be a short lunch break, so you don't have to leave and go very far to miss any of the other sessions. And then we've got a session on how can we stop the rise of the new far right. And both of these sessions, there'll be lots of time for contributions, so I really urge people to think about what they're going to say. And then we've got a really great in conversation with Neville Lawrence on fighting institutional racism today, which will be followed by a panel, including lots of justice campaigners from families who have lost relatives to police violence and brutality. Okay, so just to introduce the panel for this welcoming plenary, we've got Sabi Dalu, who's one of the Stand Up to Racism co-conveners, as well as Mohammed Kosbar from the Muslim Council of Britain, he's the Deputy Secretary General, and we're hoping to be joined as well by Daniel Kabili, NEU General Secretary. Unfortunately, Paul, the TUC General Secretary, cannot make it today, but of course he sends his regards, and we will hear from the TUC Head of Equalities later in the day, which will be great. So, without further ado, I just want to introduce Sabi to speak.
Sunday morning, and to everyone online for joining in. I just want to first pay tribute to Jane Loftus, who sadly died on the 3rd of November, who was the CWU president. And she was a vociferous campaigner against racism and fascism and gave a huge amount of support to Unite Against Fascism and Stand Up to Racism. So I just want to send our condolences to her partner Chris and all her loved ones, and to everyone at the CWU and everyone here who knew Jane very well. I also want to thank the NEU for all its support for Stand Up to Racism, and the PCS for supporting today's conference and a range of other campaigns, as we'll hear throughout the day, and the TUC for supporting us today. So thank you to all of you and to everyone here for joining us. So I just want to start by outlining some of the victories. I know Samira mentioned them, but I think it's worth giving them a mention again. So obviously, Suella Braverman has gone, and I think well done to everyone who opposed and challenged her inflammatory rhetoric over the last year. It's only been a year, can you believe it, that she became Home Secretary. She's already gone, but wow, what a racist crusade by her, the standard bearer of the reactionary right in Britain. So that's obviously a victory. And secondly, yes, the Rwanda plan has been defeated by the Supreme Court, and well done to the PCS, Care for Calais, and all of those who mounted that legal challenge, and also to all of you and others who actually opposed that on the streets, demonstrating, organising local meetings with local trade unions, your local communities, about how dreadful and unworkable that plan was. Also, we should remember that Chris Carver's, the police officer responsible for shooting him, has been charged with murder. That's a victory, because for the first time in history, a police officer in Britain has been charged for with murder for the death of a black person after police contact and in police custody. It's the first time that's happened in this country, and that should be welcomed. And obviously that's thanks to the bravery, resilience and determination of the Carver family, who tirelessly fought for this. And also well done to everyone here for supporting the family throughout its grief and its trauma and its fight for justice. Fourthly, this week, lots of victories this week. This was a good week for fighting racism. The senior police officer in the Stephen Lawrence case, Ray Adams, was found to be corrupt, something that we all knew for decades in the anti-racist movement, that there was corruption in the Metropolitan Police. There were links to organised crime, which actually, in addition to institutional racism, prevented the Lawrence family from getting justice. And so obviously that was thanks to the unrelenting campaign by the Lawrence family, and we'll be hearing more from Neville Lawrence, Stephen Lawrence's father, later on today. And then finally, from Erskine in Scotland to Skegness and Scrampton in Lincolnshire, to Portland in Dorset, and to Lewisham in South East London, up and down the country, throughout the country, we have seen the far right driven back and pushed back thanks to united campaigns, uniting local communities, local trade unions, in a united campaign against the far right and in defence of refugee rights. And that is thanks to the hard work and determination of everybody here and all those joining online. So well done, and thank you to all of you. But obviously, there's no room for complacency. Braverman has gone, but she's left a trail of carnage behind her. The government is refusing to allow safe routes to Britain, and which is why we're continuing to see the avoidable deaths of people drowning in the sea. That will continue so long as there's no policy to implement safe routes for these people to come here safely, so they don't have to make those perilous German journeys and risk their lives doing so. The Illegal Migration Act is law, and the government's toxic Stop the Boats campaign will continue until this government is defeated. We've also seen the implementation of the Public Order Act, which is undermining the right to protest and civil liberties. And the Metropolitan Police is belligerent in its response to the Casey review, with Metropolitan Chief Commissioner Mark Rowley denying the existence of institutional racism, echoing the Commission for Race and Ethnic Disparities, or the Sewell report, a couple of years ago, that was announced by the Johnson government back in April 2021. So it opened the door for the denial of institutional racism when the Macpherson report into the Stephen Lawrence case was actually transformative and revolutionary in terms of race relations in Britain, in coining the phrase institutional racism and acknowledging the level of institutional racism in Britain. This month, November, is also Islamophobia Awareness Month, and I think we should note there's been a rise in Islamophobia since we last met over the last year, and it's important to work with Muslim communities to challenge the scourge of Islamophobia. We've also seen a rise in anti-Semitism. We also equally have to stand united with Jewish communities against anti-Semitism. Make no mistake, we stand by all communities that face racism. That's what Stand Up to Racism is all about. But we've also seen a Labour Party that isn't really sufficiently challenging this scourge of racism by the Tories. We need to see a stronger and more robust response to the racism from the Tories. We've also seen, unfortunately, the Labour Party still, after months, failed to restore the whip to Diane Abbott MP, our president. And I think it's important for them to restore the whip to Diane Abbott, because if they don't, they'll quite simply alienate 80% of the African Caribbean community. And I don't think a Labour Party that's serious about fighting racism can really afford to do that. So I think my final message is, we have to fight this racist Tory agenda. Just because Braverman's gone, it doesn't mean that racism has been defeated. She's left an emboldened far right in her wake, as we saw with demonstrations led by Tommy Robinson that were violent and horrific in central London last Saturday. And I think we have to remember the lessons of history in order to defeat the far-right fascism and racism. So that is, one, to challenge this scourge of far-right and racism. We have to actually challenge the racist, Islamophobic and anti-Semitic and anti-asylum seeker rhetoric that is driving that growth. And whatever the form of racism, we have to challenge that racism, not concede to it. And secondly, we must be united in fighting the far right and racism. We have to mount the broadest alliance against the far right and fascism, including trade unions, faith communities, Muslim communities, Jewish communities, Christians, all faith communities, Hindu, Sikh, African, Caribbean, Asian, lesbian and gay communities. We have to unite the broadest alliance against racism, fascism and the far right, and that does mean putting aside differences on other issues in order to create that unity to fight the far right and racism here. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. It's a pleasure to be with you today, actually, and I'd like first to thank Stand Up to Racism for organizing this conference in a very, very difficult and challenging time to all of us, especially the anti-racism movement. And therefore, it is really grateful to have this event happening in this difficult time, especially when we see the far right's movement, let me say, organize a vicious attack on our movement, on minorities, on refugees, and in particular, the Muslim community. We've seen that this attack is very organized and is, well, trying to smear, attack, discredit many people from the movement, anti-racism movement, to discredit them and cut them off from the wider society. And we shouldn't allow that. We shouldn't allow that. As Stand Up to Racism and anti-racism in particular, we should fight back and we shouldn't allow that. And through this conference, I think it's very important to send this clear message that we will fight back and we will not allow this to happen. We've seen the former, actually, our government is part of it, whether we like it or not, is part of it. We've seen the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. We've seen her divisive narrative and divisive comment about minorities, refugees, the Muslim communities, and so on. And I'm really glad that even Rishi Sunak couldn't stand her, couldn't take it anymore, and he has to sack her. And glad that he's done that. He did the right things. Probably this is the only right things he's done so far. So, and just only I want to mention about the Islamophobia Awareness Month. As you know, we are in November now, and every year, every November from each year, we have Islamophobia Awareness Month. And let me tell you that during this month only, the increase of Islamophobia went to 600%. 600% during Islamophobia Awareness Month. 40% of the religious hate crime is against Muslims. 40%. Imagine that. And this shows how much we have to work hard to counter that and to make sure all minorities, all faith, regardless, don't face such horrible things, especially with people. I'm the chairman of Finsbury Park Mosque, and I got people from our communities coming to us to say that we've been attacked in buses, in underground, in the streets, women with children being attacked in the streets, and they feel that no one is caring anymore. It's been normalized. Islamophobia is normalized within our society, and we shouldn't allow that. It is the institutional Islamophobia was taking place at the moment. We shouldn't allow that. As a movement, we should work all together to make sure that this is not happening. In the street of London, in the 21st centuries, something like that happened, and people look, some people they say, we've been attacked and no one even tried to defend us. People look at us. Really, it's heartbreaking when you hear sisters, women, telling us these stories. And therefore, I think it's very important to get together and make sure that this never happen again in our streets in London or elsewhere in our country. And also, political parties, media, are doing their best to inflame the situation. Whether it is about Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism in general, this is happening by people who are supposed to be responsible, by people who are supposed to protect our communities. They are doing exactly the opposite. They are inflaming the situation and making it worse and worse and worse. And let me tell you, I mean, our community is very worrying. It's very worrying about the situation at the moment. They've seen that day in and day out. And they feel that they are alone. They feel that they are alone. But I'm not sure they are not alone. You all, we all, stand with them and support them and defend them. And this is what we should do all the time. I just want to mention about the two political parties, the Conservative and the Labour Party. We've been promised by the Conservative Party that there will be an inquiry about Islamophobia. This is a few years back. Well, we have the Singh report, and there is some recommendations. Believe me, nothing happened. Not a single recommendation being implemented. It's just only words. There is no action. And that's very, very worrying. That means that our government, the Conservative Party, are not serious to tackle Islamophobia within the party. And we've seen that recently in different incidents and different situations. Some people who've been suspended from the party because of their divisive and disgusting comments about Muslims, brought back. And the same things with the Labour Party. They are not, unfortunately, they are not better than the Conservative Party. We've been promised that from the leadership, from the Labour leadership, that they will stamp out Islamophobia from the party. It's the opposite. We've seen more attacks from colleagues in the Labour Party against Muslim members in the party. And this will have the consequences, no doubt about that. It will have the consequences. And therefore, we, as a Muslim company, we have no confidence and no trust in these two parties anymore. This is what we hear from people within the parties, from whether they are from the Conservative parties or from the Labour Party. And therefore, I hope that they will take this seriously and do something about it and show that Muslim community is part of the society and they have the right to be active in all political parties. Finally, I just want to mention that, some far-right figures brought back to social media and to actions the type of Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins. They now easily get access to people and spreading their hatred and divisive comments and narrative, and they've been allowed that. And we've seen what Tommy Robinson did, what he did last week. We've seen what's happened last week when the far rights went to the street, attacked everyone, including the police. And this is why I think it's very important for us as a movement to get united, to get mobilized, to get organized, to make sure that these people do not win and do not spread their hatred in our society. And this is why such a conference is very important to all of us. Thank you.
So our final speaker on the welcoming plenary will be Daniel Kabidi. The Secretary, Silence to Racism is really happy to have Daniel speaking here today and for all the support that the NEU does for Silence to Racism and in the anti-racist movement. Okay, Daniel?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And actually, I'm really pleased to be here with you all today because the fight against racism and fascism remains so important, including in resisting the rise of racism in terms of education. Education remains a key battleground in the fight against racism. But I think we come here today with some things to celebrate. It was this movement, the mass movement, that did defeat Suella Braverman. When she was peddling her anti-refugee rhetoric, we were opposing her. When she was demonising foreign-born mothers, we were opposing her. And of course, when she was labelling last week's marches and the recent marches in solidarity with Palestine, hate marches, we were opposing her. But, she has been a Home Secretary of Hate, and I think we should all take some credit for us putting her in the dustbin, hopefully for the dustbin of history for a very long time. And it was absolutely right that we did what we did. Suella Braverman is a lawyer. She has consistently attacked freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of expression. And that is something that we are going to have to continue to resist from this government and possibly from successive governments as well. Braverman is not a fascist, but what she did do was give the green light to every far-right thug last weekend to come out with all of their violence, and she will continue to try and embolden them from the back benches, I'm sure. So the fight against Braverman and Braverman's boys, as I like to call them, is far from over. We also come here as well after defeating the Rwanda bill, and I just want to do a little special shout out for any member in PCS Union and the case that they took. We always knew that it was cruel and inhumane, the Rwanda policy, but thanks to their efforts, and again the efforts of this movement, that has now been deemed illegal. So another thing we can absolutely from the NEU's point of view, we will always remain standing in solidarity with refugees. There's a pernicious narrative being pushed by those in power that schools are struggling because there are too many migrants and refugees, and we all know that is utterly false. Our schools are struggling because there has been successive years of funding cuts and underinvestment, because pay is being held back. Workloads are so high that it's driving a recruitment and retention crisis in our schools. The problems of our schools are driven by this government. They are not driven by the most vulnerable in our society. We absolutely absolutely oppose the rise in racism that is unfolding in this country and beyond. We absolutely resist the rise in anti-Semitism, oppose the daubing of paint on Jewish schools, and stand in solidarity with Jewish communities. But our colleague is also correct. There has been a real horrible normalisation of Islamophobia over recent years, but in fact over decades. And what we know is that manifests on the streets in attacks on Muslim communities, but also that normalisation of Islamophobia leads at its worst, I think, to a load of MPs going into the lobby and not voting for a ceasefire against the atrocities what are currently happening in Gaza. And we, as I said at the start, education is going to remain a key battleground in the fight against racism, particularly in regards to, what is happening at the moment. What we absolutely need to resist is this government now ramping up Prevent, which we will know will demonise Muslim children in particular. We have to raise the demand that schools should be a safe space for all young people to discuss difficult issues that are happening in the world. And I just want to echo what has been said about the Labour Party. It is not taking an effective stand against the current racism that is being peddled by this government. But I actually also worry about a Labour Party of the future, a Labour Party in government. We are going to have to really be mindful of them moving forward, because what I'm really concerned about is we've got Nigel Farage in the jungle at the moment, and I hope that he stays there. But we could soon see a change in government and a Labour Party that does not deliver for working people. That's why Nigel Farage is in the jungle at the moment. He wants to come out and build another big racist movement to the right of the Tory party when they're in government. So we absolutely have to keep on building on the ground a united front against racism on the streets and in the communities, because although we've had some victories recently, the fight is far from over. So thank you very much.